Hi, everyone. Walt Rakowich here again. And as most of you know, in my former life, I was Chief Executive Officer of Prologis. And since then, the author of Transfluence, a book about the opportunity that we all have to make a transformative difference and influence in the lives of those that we serve. So, over the past year, we've had live chats with some of the most thoughtful voices, guiding leaders to become more human and more effective. And I'm joined today by Michael Stallard, another one of those thought leaders. Michael is widely recognized as an expert on how effective leaders boost human connection in cultures to improve performance. He's the author of two books. The first is Fired Up or Burnt Out, which is about how to reignite your team's passion, how to reignite their creativity, their productivity. And the second book, more recently, is called The Connection Culture, which is about how to foster culture, a culture of connection in your organizations. Michael has written or been written about in the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes.com, Smart Brief, and Fast Company, among other news outlets and periodicals. He's also spoken to numerous institutions and companies. The list is really long, so let me just truncate it with a few interesting ones. The Federal Reserve Bank, Google, MD Anderson Cancer Center, NASA, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the U.S. Department of Treasury, of whom I am sending in my quarterly check today. A real validation to some of the things Michael talks about occurred while Texas Christian University created the TCU Center for Connection Culture to advance thought leadership around his principles. Michael started his career in the tech sector and spent time on Wall Street. Maybe that has something to do with why he thinks about connecting with people the way he does today. We're going to find that out. Michael, great to have you on with us today.
Good morning, Walt. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you. You're in Greenwich, Connecticut, right?
Yes, I am.
All right. Well, it's a little colder where you are than where I am in Naples, Florida. But it's great to have you on. And before we launch into our discussion, I've got to ask you a personal question. You worked in New York City on Wall Street. And on the other hand, you're from Illinois. Mm-hmm. You earned your JD at DePaul University. Mm-hmm. So which city did you like living in the best? I love both cities.
Oh, I love both cities too. It's really hard. I like them for different reasons, Walt. I would say I love Chicago for its community feel and its passion for sports. And, I think it's a more relationship-oriented city than New York City. Mm-hmm. And I do really love that. So it's, I would say it also has a passion for architecture. I like that about it. I like New York for its diversity, its energy, its creativity. So, I really love both for different reasons.
I do too. Do you have a favorite restaurant in one city or another?
Oh, wow. That's hard to nail down. I would say in New York City, one that comes to mind is DeWatt. I love Indian food, and there's a number of Indian restaurants there together around DeWatt that I like. I also like Levain Bakery's cookies in New York, which are amazing. And let's see, in Chicago, I like, of course, deep dish pizza at Uno's, Dewey's, Gino's, Giordano's. I like all of those. If it's pizza, I like it, but especially deep dish pizza.
And we used to live in Chicago, and we used to eat at Gibson's all the time. I just love Gibson's. For some reason, when I go to Chicago, I got to eat there.
It's a great restaurant town.
It is. It is. All right. Well, so let's just, now that you've written two books, Fired Up or Burnt Out, which I love that title, in 2007, and then more recently, Connection Culture. So in those books, you talk a lot about the importance of boosting social connection. Mm-hmm. That's really your big thing, especially in the second book, boosting social connection in the workforce. And then you say to combat America's loneliness epidemic. Mm-hmm. We're lonely, you think. And can you tell the audience, first of all, talking about your books, how is it that your books reflect your journey? I mean, you were on Wall Street.
Mhm.
and you were in the business sector, the tech sector. How do they reflect your journey? First of all, just in terms of the way you think, and then
Mhm.
why do you think it was such that this loneliness epidemic and this social connection? Why do you think that's such an important issue for us?
Mhm. Okay. So first of all, my journey, I just a few things jumped out at me over time. As we get more experience in life and in the workplace, a few things I noticed, Walt. There were some teams I worked on and CEOs I worked for that energized me, and there were others that the people around me. It was a culture that was draining me. And I
Mm,
became interested in what was driving that. And one of the things I noticed when I was on Wall Street is, and research supports this, that most mergers and acquisitions don't create economic value. And
mhm,
it's oftentimes the post merger acquisition integration where people don't connect. They end up sabotaging the plan rather than executing it with excellence. And that caught my attention. And then also just my own personal experiences. In After I left Wall Street, my wife was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer, and as I was doing research, I took a sabbatical to write about organizational culture and study it. And it was about a year in, Katie was diagnosed with breast cancer and then advanced ovarian cancer that first year. And just the places we went for her treatment, Yale New Haven Health and Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, which are both our clients now. um, they just seeing the connection in those cultures, how they connected with patients, how they connected with each other. It really brought to life what I was seeing in the research, that these relationships, I think after the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, there's been such a focus on tasks, but it's been an obsessive focus on tasks and productivity, and not really appreciating the importance of developing relationship excellence.
mhm.
And because we are hardwired to connect as human beings, we dysfunction when that need's not met. And it's happening in mass today. You brought up just the loneliness epidemic. Let me give you some data. I love data points. And this is actually before the pandemic. I would say it's worse now because of social isolation. But Cigna did research, over 10,000 American adults, 18 plus, and they used the UCLA loneliness scale and found that 61% of American adults test out as lonely. So this is a pretty widespread problem in our society.
Wow, and I got to believe it's gotten worse since the pandemic.
Yeah, it has gotten worse, and we see that in the data. It's predictable when people are lonely. And, I experienced this in my own career. I was working on Wall Street. I got involved in some really challenging, impossible mergers to make work. And it was crowding out all my time. I didn't have time for friends anymore. And when I was home, I was thinking about my work. And I started not feeling well, Walt, but I had no idea why. I know I needed more caffeine in the morning, and I would break away during the day to get a quick run in to kind of rev me up for the afternoon, and needed more alcohol at night to slow me down. Of course, you don't sleep well when you're relying on alcohol to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And, the wheels were coming off the bus. It wasn't until I really left and went on this sabbatical that I started to see that I was lonely. I was around people all the time, so I wasn't aware that those needs for connection were not being met, but I wasn't really connecting with people. My relationships were pretty much transactional in nature rather than relational. And as human beings, we need that connection. When it's not met, we dysfunction.
Yeah, it's so true. Your book goes through some fascinating neuroscience and endocrinology. Am I saying this right? Endocrinology.
Mhm, yes.
There's some amazing facts that they're beginning to discover about people's need for connection, and you actually spend a lot of time in your book talking about those facts, which I found really fascinating. Um, can you give us a few of those facts that you find most interesting?
Sure. I think what really helped me to understand what was going on with my own story, but also in mass now in society, is that I spent some time studying the work of Robert Sapolsky at Stanford, who's an expert on stress, and interacting with him as well. He was patient to answer my questions. And what I discovered, what I really learned from Sapolsky's work is that uh, our body views the lack of relationships in our life, really strong relational support. When we don't have that, our body senses it and it views it as a threat. And it puts us in a state called stress response. Stress response overallocates blood, glucose, and oxygen to the fight or flight systems, the heart, the lungs, the big muscles. And it underallocates to part of the brain called the hippocampus, that's part of the memory function, the digestive system, the immune system, and the reproductive system. And when that goes on for long periods of time, Walt, people don't feel well. But this is all happening at a subconscious level, so they don't know what's driving that. But their right brain hemisphere, which operates on a subconscious level, is sensing that they don't have this connection in their lives. It's throwing them into stress response. So predictably, what happens, people experience greater anxiety, greater depression, a higher risk of suicide ideation, and they're angrier. And I think we see those signs, and the data supports that. We're seeing that in society today. It's not just in America, it's also in many market democracies around the world. We're seeing the same things.
Is it also about being just too busy sometimes? I mean, can we just be too busy? Does the busyness of our life just create that stress?
Well, if it crowds out, if we're good about making sure that we get that connection time in our lives, that we're taking a day off a week, that we have those relationships that we can process our weekly ups and downs with, then it makes us more resilient. It helps keep the body in a state of balance, or what scientists call homeostasis, rather than stress response. And so we're able to deal with the busyness. But if we let the busyness totally crowd out our time for connection, we're going to be in trouble. It's going to affect our emotional health. It's going to affect our physical health. In fact, research would suggest that it shaves years off our lives.
Interesting. Well, I can tell you that pretty much every year that I was CEO, I remember getting sick, almost sort of like pneumonia-like sick. Might be walking pneumonia, that kind of thing, every year. And I think it was just stress related. And interestingly enough, it's been over 9 years now. I've only gotten sick one time in the 9 years. And so I think a lot of what you have to say is true.
Yeah, I think, we take people through an exercise. If you think of Atlas, the Greek figure of mythology, he's holding up the weight of the world. And one of the things we do, Walt, is we have people write their stressors across that globe that he's holding up. And then we have them next to the left leg, we have them write down their supportive relationships, their connections. And then on the right leg, we have them write down their resilience factors, like are they getting enough sleep? Are they getting some exercise in? What are some other, do they have some downtime to do things that bring them joy? Maybe they have a hobby, or they play golf, or they're artists, or they take long walks in nature, whatever it is. So we have them think of this systematically, because that's what's important, not to really isolate just your stress level or just your connections, to really look at the whole system and say, how do I strengthen Atlas's legs so that he can handle? Because a lot of times we don't have a choice about those stressors, right? When you're CEO, you don't have a choice. There are a lot of things you don't choose. Those issues come to you. And so how do we strengthen Atlas so he can cope well and still perform at a high level with the stressors that he's carrying?
So I'm going to ask you a little bit about exercise towards the end of this, but let me just hop a little bit. I'd like to hop to corporate culture a little bit. You say there are three, your book says at least, that there are three distinct cultures in the workplace. And it really helped me to frame sort of how you think, and also where we were in my company and the like. So you said there's a culture of control, there's a culture of indifference, and a culture of connection. There's three of them, and maybe people live some way in between. I don't know, but can you kind of help us understand the three of those, and where do you think most companies today are living?
Yes, So, Walt, there are three relational cultures that we find in business. Tasks are different depending upon the types of organizations. So there's kind of task aspects to culture too, but I'm zeroing in on the relationships because it's usually the relationships that affect the tasks. And so we found, and we have data to support this just through the surveys we've done with clients and with others, that the three types of cultures you mentioned: connection, control, and indifference. So let me start with control. Control is when those who have power, control, influence, when they rule over the rest. So think of
Mhm.
dictatorships around the world, where you find dictatorships in the workplace too. And
Yeah,
most people have been in the workplace long enough, have seen that.
yeah,
And it's not good for those who don't have power, which tends to be about 80% of the people have much less power than those who are invested with formal authority. And so it breeds a sense of learned helplessness, it's been called. I think you could call it hopelessness too, because people just follow orders, but they kind of disconnect emotionally. And, they basically do what they have to do to continue getting their paycheck because they have mortgages to pay and other responsibilities. That's
that
the
feels
first
like that feels a little bit like when I started off my career in the 70s and 80s. Maybe I'm wrong, but and I'm sure there are cultures that are that way today, but that doesn't feel to me as much like
Mhm.
as prevalent today as it was 20 or 30 years ago, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, interesting you point that out. I think that's true in the workplace. It's not as prevalent. But when you look around the world in terms of the leadership of nations,
Yep, good
wi-
point.
the last 15 years, we've moved in the direction of cultures of control and authoritarian leaders around the world. So, we're seeing more cultures of control. If you don't obey Putin and Russia, you're in trouble. Uh, so, those are cultures of control. So the second culture is, which we are seeing a lot today, is the culture of indifference, Walt. And that's just a culture where people are so busy that it crowds out time for connection.
Hmm.
And those needs for connection are not met, and they don't feel well. And more than half of Americans have addictions that have serious negative consequences to their health.
Hmm.
And so that's the culture of indifference. It's a culture of busyness and not really appreciating that we are hardwired to connect. And when those needs are not met, unhealthy things happen both to the individual and to the organization. The culture of connection is simply when we feel connected to our supervisor, to the people we work with, to the people we serve through our work, to the organization's leadership and its mission, its values, its reputation, to our work itself, that it's a good fit with our strengths and provides the right degree of challenge. All of those types of psychosocial connections have a profound effect on us. They make us smarter, happier, more productive. We actually literally see more when we feel connected. We're more aware of what's going on in our environment. We have a cognitive strength that helps us. We're more analytical, we're more creative. Just a whole, it's amazing what science has found about the power of human connection and how it helps us thrive in life, and how disconnection is a super stressor that sabotages our performance.
And where do you think most companies live today? Is that an overgeneralization?
No, no, I think most companies have a mix of cultures of control and cultures of indifference.
Difference.
And I would say that's a part of why Gallup came out with a report recently that said negative emotions have been growing in the workplace for years and peaked in 2020, which is the most recent data that they've released. And
Mhm.
so, that tells me that cultures of control, cultures of indifference are still gaining momentum. But I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful that coming out of the pandemic, people have a newfound appreciation for connection and the small joys in life. And I think we're going to course correct where we're seeing it already. I think one of the things that's driving the high job quits in the U.S., which are at historic highs, based on the data available to track.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we're seeing so many quits, Walt, I believe, is that workplaces are predominantly, have negative emotions, and people they know that it's not healthy, and if they have the ability, they're leaving those jobs and looking for something that's better, probably that pays better as well, but also is a healthier workplace.
Yeah. They're looking for this as an opportunity to do what they had already sensed they should do over the last few years.
Right. They're looking for bosses like you, Walt. That's what they're looking for. And, so I'm optimistic that I'm hopeful that things are going to get better after it's the silver lining. And the pandemic's certainly been awful, just the amount of death and suffering. However, I do think it's going to produce a positive effect in this one aspect, and that is work cultures and the appreciation of relationships going forward.
Yeah, I do too. There is always a silver lining for sure, and that may be one of them that's come out of this pandemic or that will. So now it's my company. I really want to cultivate that healthy workplace.
Mhm.
You say I need to pay attention to the three V's, which sounds great to me. I talk about in my book the three H's. Easy to remember, right?
Mhm.
Hard to
Yes.
explain, maybe. I don't know, but yeah, but it's great to remember the three V's. What are they? And how do they make a difference?
Mhm. Well, the three V's are vision, value, and voice. And, it's easy to remember. So let me explain that. Just when leaders communicate an inspiring vision, when they value people as individuals rather than thinking and treating them as mere means to an end, and when they give them a voice to share their opinions and ideas and consider them, then people feel highly connected. In fact, I would say if you get vision, value, voice right, you're going to be better than 99% of the leaders out there in terms of cultivating a workplace environment and culture where people thrive because it meets 7 universal human needs to thrive in the workplace. And so that's simply what it is. I believe from what I've read about you that you cultivated that type of workplace at Prologis and your years before that, I'm sure at Trammell Crow. I think of Howard Behar, who was the secret weapon of Starbucks. I think of Jim Sinegal, co-founder and longtime CEO of Costco.
Yep.
Vern Clark, who was the second longest serving chief of the U.S. Navy. Um, Tricia Griffith right now at Progressive, CEO of Progressive Insurance. So a
Mhm.
lot of great examples out there, but they're in the minority. I'm hoping that, leaders who cultivate connection become predominant in America and around the world over time.
Yeah, me too. I mean, one of the quotes that you had in your book, I loved. It was under the three V. It was from John Wooden, and you might substitute values in with character, but he said that the ability may get you to the top, but your character, your values, will keep you there. And I really believe that some leaders just rise to the top and then they peter out because nobody wants to work for them.
I've seen it time and again. I've seen some brilliant leaders who had brilliant plans in place, but they were unable to connect with people. And, I think of a couple examples just right off the top of my head. They both ended up being fired. And they were very smart, very capable people, but they I would say either they were blind they had blind spots that they didn't know they weren't connecting with people, or they were unwilling to really learn and grow and develop the skills to connect with people.
Yeah.
So, it was sad because, these leaders really were brilliant on the task side and understanding the business and coming up with, category killer strategies, but if you can't get people to follow you, it's not gonna work.
Yeah. So you talk about Costco. And
Mhm.
by the way, Costco is my one of my most favorite places. I'm
Me
likely to
too.
go there this afternoon. My wife gave me a couple honeydew things to do. Um, eh, how do they utilize, and you do talk about this in the book, but how do they utilize the three V's?
Well, it's interesting. When I first met Jim Sinegal, the longtime CEO, and he's retired now. He's
Yeah.
in his 80s. He was co-founder, and I remember asking Jim, "Well, how do you describe your culture?" And he said, "Do the right thing." And I was like, "What?" Well, what do you mean by that? And he said, "We obey the law. We take care of our members. We take care of our employees. We respect our suppliers, and we reward our shareholders in that order." And if
Mm.
you do that, all I can say is if you do that, I hope you own Costco stock. Let's put it that way. It's been wildly successful. And that is their vision. It's not really about their mission, their vision is more about their values, but it produces a pride. People know they can trust Costco. You know,
Mhm.
if their suppliers don't live up to their standards, they'll make it themselves. Seriously, they have so much money that it is a layup for them to do that, and it puts some pressure on the suppliers to meet Costco's standards. So that's that's their vision is do the right thing. Secondly, they're well known for really taking care of the people who work at Costco. And you see that in the warehouses if you're there and you observe it. But it's the top down. It's Jim Sinegal and the other leaders over years. They really care about people. They connect with people. A lot of them started, as they say, shagging shopping carts in the parking lot. Right? They started on the bottom and worked their way up. And they also have a kind of an apprenticeship type training program where they're always helping people learn and grow and kind of rise to the area of level of responsibility that they want. Now,
Mhm.
those things all really communicate that they value people. They've also every year they've given their employees some raise. They've never not given annual raises. And then that's valuing people. And then the third, voice. I remember I was speaking at one of Costco's annual managers conferences in Seattle, and they showed video after video, Walt. You would have loved this, Walt. Video after video of employees from all around the world who are sharing their idea to make Costco better. It could be improving the member experience, improving the employee experience, making Costco more efficient, reducing costs, whatever it was. It was literally from all around the world. And they just kept coming video after video after video. So they were disseminating these ideas to all the Costco warehouse managers who were there, like 1,300 of them, I think. And it made me realize that people who work at Costco know that their ideas are wanted. And so they have a willingness to speak up and share their ideas, and ideas may be selected and filmed and shown at the annual managers conference in Seattle. So people have a voice there, and it's powerful. Costco has amazing employee retention levels. They're the envy of their competitors,
Yep.
and it's true with their employees. It's true with their managers.
Yep. Couldn't agree with you more. And as I said, I love shopping there. So I mean, that probably says something. Um, you also talk about in your book, and I talk about in mine too, the importance of mentorship
Mhm.
in leaders. Um, and I once had a coach who told me very similar to what you just said. Walt, if you get the employee experience right, the customer experience and the shareholder experience will fall in place. Very similar to what you just said about Costco.
Mhm.
Um, that you said the shareholders are fifth, but actually the shareholders will get taken care of down the road if you
Mhm.
take care of what's most important, which I thought was great. And so my coach was my mentor during a very, very difficult time. Um, do you have a mentor? Have you ever had a mentor? And what do you recommend to people out there where you're giving speeches and the like about mentorship? Just curious.
Well, I've had a lot of mentors and coaches, both in business and in life outside of work. I've had a spiritual mentor for many years. He's no longer alive, but had a big impact on my life. And yeah, my advice to people is, figure out where you want to grow, what areas you want to grow. So there was a time, when I left Wall Street and um, I wanted to, I knew I was going to my book would be coming out in a few years. And I called Robin Wolfson, who's my agent now. At that time, we were working with her at Morgan Stanley. And I said, Robin, I have this book coming out. Help me. I'm going to be out there speaking. I have a fear of crowds. What do I, help? So she sent me to an acting coach, Twyla Thompson in New York City, who was phenomenal.
Hmm.
And at the Actors Institute, TAI, they call it. And I went there, and they taught me a few things, really helped me become comfortable and how to connect with a crowd that I was speaking to. And of course, I'm speaking on connection, so I need to be able to connect to the audience. So that's just one example, but many, many, many examples over the years where I've learned. And
Mhm.
my advice: find someone who has expertise in an area you want to grow on, and just ask them. Hopefully, you can find a mentor. If not, oftentimes it's worth the investment to find a coach who can help you with that. Well, I saw Sally Helgeson was one of your You and I was talking to Sally, and she had asked me, she had asked for advice about presenting online, and I sent her to the Actors Institute because they are really good at that sort of thing. And I know it was helpful to Sally. So it just shows that, even a powerhouse like Sally, we all need to keep learning and growing. And I know you appreciate that. You're a humble, very capable leader, and we're always learning and growing.
No question about it. By the way, Sally was one of the best interviews. I mean, she just did an amazing job on this show. So I think the world of her too. But okay, so let's talk about how you operationalize this. Your book, I mean, your book went through detail after detail about how you operationalize connection. I honestly didn't think, I mean, you sort of you can talk to people about connection at 30,000 feet and they think they understand it and it's obvious. No, you literally dig into 15 actionable building blocks in your book that you can personally do. And I think within those 15, there's probably another 15 or 20 or 30 nuggets of wisdom within those 15. I mean, it's just amazing. So anyway, kudos to you. Congratulations. You did a great job. Some terrific suggestions. But what if you're not a leader yet? Like a lot of people listening in, what if you aspire to be a leader, but you're not really a leader? You don't have a large flock of employees that you're leading. And also, what if you work in, people ask me all the time, well, what if, I work in a place where the culture is bad, and no matter how much I try to connect with people, it starts from the top. The culture's bad. I'm not leading anybody. I can't really influence, what do I do? I get that question all the time from people, Michael, and it's the hardest question that I have to answer because everybody is in a different situation. But I'm kind of curious as to what you think about that.
Well, when you think about leadership, and I know, Walt, you appreciate this, just given the work you're doing and the thinking that you've done that's reflected in your book, that we can lead through formal authority, but we lead at the highest level through our influence. And we don't need to be in a position of formal authority to lead others through our influence. And so I would recommend to someone who wants to lead and have formal leadership authority that they read your book, read Connection Culture, read Sally's and others, many of the guests you've had on this, soak that up. That, in a sense, that's passive mentoring. You're learning from people who have led, who have given a lot of thought and contributed ideas about leadership. Just soak up that wisdom and start applying it. And you'll find that you will lead through your influence. And in time, that will be recognized and you will have opportunities to lead with formal authority. Of course, in addition to the formal authority, you want to continue to be leading through your influence because that's what gets people to give their best efforts, to align their behavior with your goals, to communicate, to adapt, to cooperate, is that combination of formal leadership authority and especially the leadership power you have through your influence.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And I want to talk about an example about that influence. I think effective leadership is sometimes just about connecting with people in small ways, doing the little things that kind of show you care. The example you use in your book about how a man named Big Jim was treated at Starbucks was so impactful to me and showed me that all of us, no matter what our position, no matter who we lead or don't lead, can connect to people and make a difference in their lives. You don't have to be a leader to connect.
Right.
That's what you were saying. Can you tell that story? That was really
sure.
powerful.
Well, I actually was going to read, it's very brief. I thought I would read it because it's, I can't tell it as well as I can read it. So this is, the story came from Howard Behar, who was the longtime president of Starbucks in the US and then the first president of Starbucks International. Howard wrote a great book that I also recommend to your viewers called It's Not About the Coffee. He's definitely one of those leaders who had formal leadership authority and a lot of influence. He was Starbucks' secret weapon. So let me just read this story about Big Jim. Howard tells the story of an elderly Starbucks customer named Big Jim who lived in a nursing home across the street from a Starbucks store. Every day, about the same time in the afternoon, Big Jim came in and ordered a small drip coffee and a blueberry muffin. Big Jim and the Starbucks staff became like family, not a transactional relationship of customer and employee. The Starbucks baristas often wrote little notes to him on the coffee cup or on the bag they put the muffin in. One day, Big Jim didn't show up. Concerned, they sent a barista across the street with a drip coffee and a blueberry muffin to check on him. The receptionist at the nursing home informed him that Big Jim had passed away in his sleep. The next day, one of Big Jim's children stopped by the store and asked the manager if all the baristas and the manager could possibly attend Big Jim's funeral because he loved them, and it would have meant a lot to him to have them there. The store manager said yes and arranged for the others, cover for the others for their work. When they walked through the front door of the funeral home, there on display, covering 3 big tables, were Starbucks cups and bags with the handwritten notes to Big Jim that he had held on to. Bihar wondered, who would have ever thought a small thing, just saying I love you basically every day, would mean so much to another human being? But it does. And I think, that just reflects who Howard Bihar is too. He's a very caring leader, and he had tremendous influence on Starbucks culture. So, the little things do make a big difference.
So we can all lead, irrespective of the flock that we lead. We can all lead every day through influence. And sometimes it's just the little things that we do. And I thought it was interesting that the baristas actually went to the funeral, or that they went across the street, things that weren't written about, but they went across the street and asked where he was, or
Right.
they
were concerned.
took time off and went to the funeral. I thought that was
Showed they
amazing.
cared about him.
Right. Those are also little things as well. So,
Yeah.
Michael, I want to end with this last question, and that is, what are you most grateful for?
Well, in the book, I tell about my, I was doing research about organizational culture, and my wife, Katie, was diagnosed with breast and advanced ovarian cancer, and seeing the connection that the people who worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and Yale New Haven Health had with each other and with their patients and their patients' families, it really brought to life what I was seeing in the research. And just last week, we celebrated Katie's 18th year of being free from advanced ovarian cancer. So right now, I am really grateful for that. It's a milestone and something I'm immensely grateful for.
Well, that's just that's awesome, and she's better now, huh?
Yeah, she's fine. In fact, we work together. We often do workshops together on connection culture. And, Katie has some background in the performing arts, and she loves a microphone, is our family joke. So she has a great sense of humor, and people just absolutely love her. She's an amazing connector and remarkable woman.
Well, interesting you'd say that, because that's number one on my list. That's my family. I have 2 great kids. I have 2 wonderful sisters, and I had 2 terrific parents that were incredibly influential in my life. I'll end it with that. Michael, I just want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to thank everybody that's on the line for tuning in as well. And Michael, just thanks for being so gracious with your time today. Really, really appreciate it. And if you'd like to learn more about Michael's work, check him out at Michael. I have you at michaelleestallard.com. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, michaelleestallard.com. Obviously, you can find out more about me and Transfluence at waltrakowich.com. And make sure that in the future you keep an eye out for future live streams. We try to do this about once a month. And until then, I would encourage everyone to find a way to have a positive influence on those around you each and every day. Michael, thank you so much again. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Walt.